Thanks for tuning in. This is Mr. New Pegasus, here to bring you the next chapter in this unfolding story of a ragtag group of creatures trying to make their way out there in the Wastelands. It seems that during my acquisition of this here story, some errant spots of blood made their way onto the pages of the first chapter, and in reading through the second, I noticed that one of these spots had obscured part of someone's name, causing me to mispronounce it. So, Alguacil, if you're out there and still alive, and happen to be listening, please accept my apologies. Now, without further ado, let's dig in to Chapter 2, A Relic Thrown Violently Back into the World. Wake up and realize you aren't where you fell asleep. You then know it's going to be a long day. Well, this day has to start with a bit of violence and bloodshed for the unprepared. Pecos Bill. It turned out destiny was short. We came to a halt when Buddy stopped. He was the lead of our group, and large enough that going around him would be incredibly difficult. We were at a junction, and the right branch was bathed in the flickering light of torches that glinted off the unfinished metal wall, while the left was consumed of darkness. This realization should have been obvious, but I suppose the dead bodies had kept me distracted. I had a pip buck. With practiced precision, I pressed a button and the light cut on. The room lit up much brighter now, and we could see for a good 10 paces without issue. Well, at least 10 of my sized paces. Sure, there were some glints as I swept my pip buck over the corridors, the steel walls reflecting the light and distant gleams in the shadows giving hints of what lay beyond. But the flashlight was so much better than any torchlight could ever be. To the right, there was the reflection of small objects in the darkness beyond the torches, and to my left and ahead was another junction with 2 doors on either side of the hallway. Chifundo trotted over to the door on our left and opened it. I stood behind the wall as Alguacil stepped inside quickly and looked around. "What do you think, Chifundo?" the griffin asked. "I am unsure, as there are spirits to inure. This room looks dead as far as the light of our eyes can shed," Chifundo replied in the rhythm the zebras seemed to keep to. "Great, I am going to have a whole dictionary just to get everything that pink-striped zebra says?" Curious, I peeked my head in, and the room had gotten as quiet as a bunch of foals in front of Nightmare Moon. Chifundo shrugged at us and walked out into the hall again. The walls here were made of metal, and I got a vague sense of déjà vu. Something here was similar to a stable, but not quite right. It was more like an incomplete bunker without reinforcing or furniture. I turned around to see Alguacil had gotten out of the door, giving me a chance to examine the room while he decided to look through the keyhole of the one across the hall. In a moment or two, though, he raised a talon and motioned for us to come closer. As soon as I took 2 hoof steps, the griffin motioned to stop us. "Mole rats, a few of them. Looks like a supply closet," he whispered in a voice that could grate cheese. My ears flopped onto my face, one of them hitting my eye and forcing me to close it. What in Celestia's wildest dreams? Why had it done that, twitching that way? Without saying anything, Neota and Buddy got right up against the door while Alguacil and Chifundo positioned themselves behind them. From how swift they responded, I was certain they had done this sort of thing before. I, on the other hoof, turned around and looked down the hall where we had come from. I wasn't quite ready to see the violence this group was capable of. I was still dealing with the bodies in the pool down the hall, the image of skeletons reflected beneath the water's surface. It was an unforgettable one. Didn't help that the torches in the pool room kept a grim vigil beyond the end of the pip-buck light. Before I knew it, the door flew open as Buddy and Neota charged in. I didn't have to turn back to know what was happening. I could hear the snarl, followed by the snapping of bones, and the high-pitched scream of some creature that was cut off with a sickening squelch. Alguacil spun the barrel of his revolver and shouted, "Duck!" before 3 bullets quickly blasted out of the .357 Magnum into the room. With every pull of the trigger, I heard a rat's high-pitched squeal of pain and a heavy splatter from the impact. What was he firing at that I could hear the impact? This was how the world was? I thought. I'm a tiny little mare, completely unprepared for this. I'm not even sure if we're the good guys. The box opened up a pair of holes on the sides as 2 single-shot shotguns popped out and fired. There wasn't a scream or anything in response to the massive bang of those 2 rounds. The only sound beyond the door was an echoing splatter that sickened my guts. Whatever box Pone hit, it didn't have a chance to let out a death cry. Right as all the noises seemed to settle, however, I heard a mole rat shriek and a shrill whinny of pain from Neota. My perked ears swiveled in the sound's direction before I too turned around. Quickly, I poked my head in and immediately saw the horrific scene. A mole rat, a big one, mauling the gray-black zebra pinned to the ground. It must have landed its fangs on something vital, because next thing I knew, blood and sinew flew up into the air while Nyota neighed out helplessly. I panicked, yet at the same time, and to my surprise, my mind reacted instead of sputtering to a halt. I brandished the pump action in my hooves and leveled it at the mole rat, my pip-buck reflexively hitting SATS. I had never activated that particular pip-buck program, short for Stable Tech Arcane Targeting Spell, before, so I didn't know what to expect. The outline of the mole rat was in red, while Nyota's was in green. A square targeting reticle popped up that lined up with the end of my shotgun barrel. More importantly, time seemed to have slowed down, and I could think, process. As well, I got an aim-assisting crosshair where the shotgun was pointed. The picture before me was like a perfectly frozen frame of a horror movie. Sats was helping me compensate for the close quarters of combat by highlighting the outline of every creature in the room. For the mole rat, a dark violent red, and Nyota, a soft welcoming green. I could see a green outline extended from my weapon's barrel that had a label above it, Shotgun Blast Zone. While the area was no bigger than a hoof, I knew exactly where to aim to hit the vicious, filly-sized creature and not strike Nyota. I aimed at the spine of the creature, the sight of its leathery hide making me want to scream in disgust. While the frozen frame of action made me want to cover my eyes, I queued up the shot, only then to hesitate. "Release the spell! Let it fly, Sunrise! Save that zebra!" Oddly, the voice in my head was foreign and not my own this time, though I didn't get a chance to ask it. "Get off of him!" I heard myself scream, my voice muffled by the gun trigger in my mouth. The trigger pulled with the release of Sats. The mole rat stopped its vicious mauling and looked up just as Sats ended and time resumed. It was like it had somehow heard me or knew of its impending fate. I could see the moment in time when the barrel lit up with fire reflected back from its cold, dark black eyes. The impact of recoil drove the stock into my mouth and shoulder with a pain I swore I had felt before. The creature flew into pieces as the buckshot ripped into its spine. Its blood flew out in every direction, splattering across the supply boxes in the room. Nyota in particular was covered in a pool of gore, bone, and body fluids mixing with his blood. I dropped the shotgun and ran forward at full speed. I looked at my pip-buck for the inventory in my backpack, and thankfully it showed that I had bandages in the left pocket. I ripped them out with my mouth, my shaky hooves immediately starting to apply them to the wounds. "Nyota, are you gonna be okay?" I asked in a panic, just wanting the profuse bleeding to stop. My hooves were working frantically to tie the bandage and apply pressure. He pushed me back after I had badly applied the bandage and pressed down with a hoof on the bite wounds. I could see slack in the bandages, and I knew that I was no medical expert. "I have a healing potion. I'll be fine. Calm down, Sunrise," Nyota coolly stated as he stood up. There were half a dozen bite marks, and several of them were soaking the bandages. I kept wanting to help, not entirely knowing how. I just wanted him to be okay. He reached into his saddlebags and took out a purple potion in a red bottle with a set of butterflies on its label. After biting the cork off and spitting it out, the zebra downed it in one gulp. I watched in amazement as the bandages slowly were pushed off him and fell to the floor. He wasn't bleeding anymore. While the coat of fur on him was drenched in blood and had holes in it, the wounds themselves had miraculously closed without scarring. Chifundo got up and placed a pink-striped hoof over my shoulder. He was much larger than I was, so he had little difficulty turning me around. "Come with me, one-up son. Let us get your trusty shotgun," he said as he led me out of the food storage room. I could see several bits of food everywhere, as well as a total of 5 dead mole rat bodies. Well, what I assumed to be the guts and gore of 5. My brain was still processing the wounds those creatures had inflicted. How and when did mole rats get that big? Last time I checked, they were about half the size of a full-grown pony. I turned back to get a look at Nyota as he pulled out a knife, the same knife I had fixed earlier. He was using it to skin the mole rats. I couldn't bear to look as he started stripping flesh and skin from the bones. The sounds his action produced made my ears fold up in a vain attempt to block out the noise. Good eating if we cook it, Rat," Buddy said as I looked at him with dismay. But But ponies don't eat meat? I blurted out, picking up my shotgun in one hoof and passing it to my tail to stow the weapon. Wait, since when could I grab things with my tail? When did it get so prehensile? Did my tail just put the shotgun in my holster? I turned my head to see my orange-white highlighted tail had done just that, before sliding a shell into the chamber to replace the one I had fired. Yep, that happened. Not the oddest thing that's happened today, I suppose, but let's get back to that later. Listen here, little lady. You can eat meat, so it won't hurt you to try it, Buddy said, practically brandishing a slice of dripping mole flesh at me. The fur at the back of my neck stood on end at the thought of putting that anywhere near my mouth. I choked back bile before I could give my reply. No, thank you, I shot back, my face that of pure disgust as I felt my stomach twisting into a tighter knot. Once we get out, will I ever be able to eat it all? And now for a public service announcement. We have received a warning from the Silverfang mercenaries that travelers should be wary around Taint Wood. I know that there are moss, plants, and lack of radiation in the area, but also the plants there are lethal. 2 travelers recently ignored this warning, and so I have to give it again. Do not go to Taint Wood. Manticores are one issue, along with plant-like mutants and the plants themselves. Flowers will use you for food after they knock you unconscious with pollen. My advice, don't go anywhere near it. I get that there is the juicy chance of salvage in a fresh apple, but it's not worth having a manticore snack on you, or the next charger mutant that is going to try to snack on your face. You'll have to get used to it if you want to survive out here, Alguacil replied as he worked to strip the last of the mole rat's meat, hide, and teeth. I stepped out into the hallway and tried to put it out of my mind. A few minutes later, everyone stepped back outside the door into the hall, all covered with the gore of the mole rats. Neota had a few extra splotches of blood from his insides mingling with the gore from skinning and butchering. I could see the distinct difference in red with my pip-buck light. At least this pony is alive and friendly, Sunrise. Now try to calm down. Buddy took point again, and we started down the hallway further into the unexplored depths. The dim, sometimes flickering light provided the sense of foreboding. I stood in the center of the group as we came up to a junction that was beyond the cross-hallway doors. Buddy came to a stop, along with the sound of hooves, claws, and paw pads. "Which way do you want to go?" Buddy called back to the rest of us. I thought about it and shrugged. Left seems to be the best bet, I say. It was only logical. The left was illuminated by torches, while the right was nothing but pitch black. As the others quietly discussed my suggestion amongst themselves, I took this moment to activate my Pip-Buck's eyes-forward sparkle and tag everyone as friendly. The visor in my helmet seemed to be the easiest way for the spell matrix to adjust to my vision and display the information. I saw 5 other pips of green over the compass with names over them of my new companions. I was not sure if they were friends yet, but this gave me some information to keep up with them in the dark. They were friendly for now, not to mention not being mean for the sake of being mean. Chifundo nodded as she looked to the right. "I'm in agreement with the tiny runt. The right houses spirits we should not affront." Tiny runt? I swear I'll punt. If it wasn't obvious, what he said didn't sit well with me. I turned back and looked up at the pink-striped zebra with a strained smile but narrowed eyes. Right as I was about to say something, Alguacil drew a revolver. He gave its cylinder one good spin and nodded, with the loud cocking of the firearm's next shot locking into place. "Get moving that way then, but stay together. Whoever took us and put us in that pool, most likely they're still here." And get moving we did. For the first half a dozen steps we took down the hall, things were fine. However, we soon had to turn around when a shout of pain came from somewhere behind us. We spotted the box just lying there, and it seemed shorter than before. It hadn't moved, and it took a moment for me to realize that the pony previously inside was missing. I dashed past Chifundo and around the corner, taking with me my Pip-Buck, the only light source besides Buddy's torch. "Great, you just left your new friends in the dark," was what the tiny pony in my head said. I rounded the corner and my empty stomach twisted into a knot again. "Please let me have at least 1 minute without feeling like I need to vomit. Please, goddesses." There lay a pony on the ground, holding her foreleg and biting her lip. The small mare was slightly larger than me, but definitely another earth pony filly. She had a pearl-white coat and a snow-white mane with matching tail. Also, she was a blank flank, like me. Her eyes were the color of honey, and, to be completely honest, I didn't see why she would hide under the box. She was quite pretty for a foal, although I did notice that her pupils weren't circles, but squares? This is gonna keep me up at night later trying to figure this out. I took a few moments to inspect her. She was holding her right foreleg, and from the unnatural way it was bending, it was clearly broken. Said lurch then twisted slightly into a knot when her leg had 2 additional joints to it beyond a knee and an ankle. Wonderful. More death, injuries, and gore than I have seen in my entire life in what, an hour? Maybe 2? Goddess, can you have something nice happen today? Corners! What happened? I heard as the others trotted up behind me. I tried to open the door, and when I kicked it, she chewed her lip to push back the pain. Neota walked up to the light of my pip-buck and smiled. Calm down, Sunrise. I can take care of this, the zebra stallion informed me as he took out a couple of pieces of pipe and gestured for me to hand him my bandages. I did all I could do to help before he turned my head away to look at Box Pony's eyes. I thought of something to say to start a conversation with her in order to hopefully keep her mind off the pain. Hey, what's your name? I asked with the grace of a mechanic's daughter. Sugar Cube Serenade, though I sometimes go by Corners or Box Pone, for the great box keeps me safe, the foal replied. Great, she's either completely twigged or absolutely insane. Corners, can you please not wander off again? I asked, looking at my pip-buck real quick. Huh. Turned out I tagged the box instead of her. Luckily, it was simply a matter of removing the tag from the box and applying it directly to the pony. At least my eyes forward sparkle would keep track of her from now on and not her box. I just got curious, wondering what was this way. Chifundo said bad juju, and I really wanted to know, the filly replied earnestly. Well, don't... My voice was silenced by a sickening crunch and the sight of Corners biting her lip to not scream. Well, I certainly, yet unwittingly, did my job. Neota had set the bone and used me as a distraction. Really? I'm the distraction now? I'm your random mare? Was this a sign of friendship for a zebra? There. You won't be able to run on it, but at least you can move, Neota informed her coldly. I hung my head before slowly walking back to the box. Grabbing it between my teeth, I pulled it towards the two while Neota gave Corners instructions. Our box pone was another mare at least, and a smaller one like me to boot. Wait, was I even a filly anymore? I had just found out I was 181 extra years old, yet I looked the same and I didn't remember much of what happened at all. Now that I had stepped out of the stable, these were the questions I had to find answers to. I hadn't grown at all. What had those doctors done to me? Why was my coat now green? I had a vague memory of the color changing, but not when. How long was I in stasis and not in stasis? How old am I really? I put the box over Corners and gave the best reassuring smile I could. It must have worked, as the eyes inside the box looked a lot more warm and receptive. There, you're in your box, protected again. I was trying to be as reassuring as possible, but with my friendly smile. I noticed Alguacil was looking inside the door's keyhole, the same one Corners had broken her leg on. How do you break a leg on a door, seriously? Nothing inside but ponykins with some old armor on them, he stated bluntly before trying the door. Locked. It didn't budge. And y'all know how to pick a lock? Buddy asked with a puzzled look. I stepped forward and looked at my pip-buck. The inventory matrix said I had a screwdriver and several bobby pins. Those would work for that, right? I thought as I searched my coat pockets, fishing out a bobby pin with my teeth while my tail held the screwdriver out for my hoof. I shook away the thought of my tail having a mind of its own and the ability to act with it, setting to my work instead. Putting what I've seen in old movies and read from novels into practice, I leaned forward and pressed the screwdriver into the lock with one hoof while also using the bobby pin in my mouth to fiddle with it. I kept at this for nearly 2 minutes before snap! The bobby pin broke and I simply shrugged. I'd need to practice this, or I suppose someone else would have to prove to be better at it. I guess not, I said, discovering the lock's tumblers refused to move due to the broken bit of pin wedged inside it. Right as I scratched my chin in thought, Buddy pushed me back, sliding my hooves over the tiles. The mighty sand dog stood up to his full height and brought his weight down on the lock with his full force. His claws impaled the wood around the lock with a great crash. There was a wooden wrenching sound as he twisted it and eventually tore the door open with a wail. The wooden door slammed against the steel wall as it swung violently open, and the sound was similar to that of a sledgehammer splitting firewood. With the way open, the others all went in first and cleared the room. I took a few trepidatious steps behind them as my pit-buck lit up the room. There were a dozen pony-shaped ponykins of stallions in Canterlot Royal Guard-styled armor. The old armor was made of metal and slightly rusted. The dust in the room was heavy, and as the 6 of us trotted inside, we slowly left prints in it. I darted forward to an alcove off to our right and discovered that it was empty. I turned around to find Alguacil walking up to each of the ponykins and stabbing them through the head with his knife. "Do you really feel the need to stab everything you perceive?" said Chifundo, who I noticed was staying by the door. The pink-striped zebra just kept repeating in rhythm, "This voodoo is bad juju," and shaking his head between the beats of his canter. "What is with this zebra?" "When a zebra says bad juju, you take no chances," the griffin replied and resumed stabbing. Regulator Stormy Sky has reported suffering casualties near... Several regulators did not come back, and at present the long eye of the law seems to be occupied. They are offering a bounty to anyone who can take care of... near... for them, in addition to seeking medical supplies for their agents near... Come on, folks, give the regulators a hand. They are at least trying to keep some of the peace around the wastes. Come on down to Crazy Mac's Arsenal Emporium. Do you need a shotgun shell that can penetrate a tank? Try Crazy Mac's patented war crime round. Need smoke grenades that also act as phosphorus to burn away pescurators? Crazy Mac's dual-purpose smoke bomb is just what you need. No fuse, just throw and enjoy. Come on down and get yourself ready to issue out Crazy Mac's brand of carnage on the Wasteland, 2nd story at the roof. Just then, I noticed a door past the older griffin and walked over to it. As Buddy was stripping the armor off one of the ponykins, I trotted past the older griffin and looked into the keyhole as Alguacil had done earlier. Oddly enough, the hole was right at my height. So there are advantages to being short. At first, I spotted nothing but shadows and a few bits of furniture on the other side. Right as I was about to pull away from the lock, however, a pony walked just past my vision. Then a hoof grabbed something from the table before I heard a loud munching sound indicative of someone eating food. A pony was in there. Maybe they're trapped down here too. Excitedly and without a second thought, I knocked upon the door. I felt 4 sets of eyes from my 5 new friends staring at me quite suddenly. That's right, 4. 2 of my companions seemed to have found a way to lose alternate eyes. I was incredibly self-conscious as Neota moved to the side of the door on my left. Buddy bolted upright and got on the right side of the door. Both were standing in a position like they were ready to put paw and hoof violently to anything that came out. "Kid, what in tarnation? Do you have a death wish?" Alguacil said in a harsh whisper to me. There was a long, pregnant pause as I heard hooves on the other side of the door moving and shuffling while all of us sat there dead still. The tension in the air was palpable. The response from the other side of the door was a voice sounding surprised and actually upset with us being there. As far as I could tell, the voice belonged to an adult male. "What the hell? Hello?" Whoever he was, he sounded very confused. I didn't hesitate at this point. "Hey, when you're 4 hooves in the water, may as well swim, right?" "Oh, hi. We're lost down here and wanted to know if you knew the way out, or are you lost too?" I turned to look for my companion's approval, only to notice Alguacil had his beak slacked wide open as Chifundo was matching his expression. There wasn't an immediate response, and I felt a twitch in my eyebrow as a feeling of someone else looking at me made my hoof itch. "Wait, my hooves itch? Apparently now they do." I heard a hushed voice from beyond the door. A different voice. This one a mare? "It's a filly? When did we get a filly? I don't remember the green one." This was followed by some ponies shouting through the door, "Yeah, stay right there. We'll show you out. We'll show you out real nice." At this point, the twitch in my eyebrow was matched in rhythm by the itch in my hoof. Neota motioned for me to step back a bit. I was confused, but decided it was best to listen to the zebra. I took a few steps back and let my excitement go to my head. My filly hooves shook as I waited for the other ponies to come out to us. I scratched at the itch in my right forehoof as we waited. The anticipation was torture, but soon the door flew open, and before me were two shadows in the darkness and one pony. The pony was a beige and brown Pegasus with a dozen scars over his body and what looked like a half-crippled wing. He had a solid green mane and a long rusted saber in his maw caked with old blood. Before anything else could happen, Alguacil leveled his revolver while Neota rocketed like a coiled snake assaulting its prey. He grabbed the Pegasus by the hooves, and they tumbled through the air for just a second before Neota slammed the winged stallion onto his back in the blink of an eye. His rusty saber clattered to the ground and slid right at my hooves with a metal uncloven bone clang as it stopped. The two other shadows cried out in surprise and gave out a yell of "Nope!" in unison before disappearing with the slam of a door in the distance. "Hey, let me go!" the Pegasus shouted, trying to get out from under Neota. The zebra had him expertly pinned down by the shoulders and wings with his hooves. "Stop moving or else you die." Alguacil walked up to the struggling Pegasus and pressed his revolver against its temple. I blinked in disbelief at this. "What? Shouldn't we talk to them first?" I demanded. If these five had turned out to be my friends, what is to say that they couldn't make friends with this Pegasus? "Pipe down, Sunrise," Buddy declared. He motioned his claw to Chifundo, me, and the door we came in through as he closed the door the scarred Pegasus had come through. Chifundo took me by the flank and led me out, and in doing so, I felt the duster had ridden up. When I turned to my flank, it had been exposed from under my duster, my cutie mark out for everyone to see. My brows knit at what I saw. When did I get that? This was going to take some real explaining, as I didn't even know where it had come from. A unicorn pony, clad in silver power armor, exploding from the inside out, was emblazoned upon my flanks. I looked over my shoulder to see Alguacil staring at me with a raised eyebrow over his eyeball-less socket. He nodded to the cutie mark on my flank. "We'll talk later, Sunrise," he said, as if to say we could talk not only about the Pegasus, but about what was on my flank. I suddenly felt self-conscious about my cutie mark as we stepped outside. Chifundo turned to me and started to purposely talk over the hushed voices on the other side of the door. "You have a sixth sense about you, and a touch of foresight to events before they are new," Chifundo said as my hoof kept itching and I tried to scratch it. "The sense? What do you mean?" I questioned back. "You had an itch earlier before the mole rat stitch. I've seen it before, and know it means to forbore," the pink-striped zebra stated flatly, in a way that could only make my coat crawl. I didn't respond. I wasn't sure what to make of Chifundo at this point, and wanted to just strain my ears to hear the voices inside the other room. That was apparently all the time they needed, though. Buddy opened the door after a couple minutes. "Come on back in," he said, as they still had the Pegasus pinned down with a gun to his temple. Chifundo put his hoof around me and led me back inside like he was escorting a little foal. After staring down at the Pegasus for a spell, Alguacil sighed. "All right, we're going to take you with us to lead us out. But before we do, I've got to break your wings." I was shocked by what I had just heard. I broke out of Chifundo's hoof and rushed forward. "No, he hasn't hurt any of us yet," I yelled out, loud enough that I'm pretty sure the entire cave heard it. Alguacil looked surprised that I moved that fast or that I would protest. "This is a raider. What do you care?" he demanded. "Please don't break my wings. I mean, my left one is bad enough. I can barely fly as it is," he pleaded through the hold Neota had around his forehead and throat. I didn't know what a raider was, but that didn't stop me from staring up at Alguacil in frustration. "Look, we'll compromise," I said as I turned to the Pegasus. Would it be okay if I tied your wings to your body, just till we can find our way out?" I looked at Alguacil and the Pegasus with a nervous smile. I hoped they couldn't see just how upset I was at the idea of having to hurt another pony, or my companions. "Can I call them friends yet? Inflicting damage on this Pegasus, or any other pony for that matter." "All right, Sunrise, but if he makes a wrong move..." Alguacil wasn't able to finish that veiled threat as I took out a rope and began working it around the Pegasus' body, securing his wings. I wasn't entirely sure what Alguacil meant by his would-be threat, but soon he had a lever-action shotgun out and was keeping it behind the Pegasus' head as I worked. "He's doing that just for show, right? What's your name?" I asked our captive, looking at his cutie mark. It was a set of soft clouds and a full rainbow over it. It was rather chipper in contrast to his badly mangled wing, knife wound scars, and a bullet scar on his chest. "Spring Bronco," he replied with a relieved sigh. The expression on his face got slightly less tense when my hooves finished their work. "Were you forced into attacking other ponies? And why did we wake up in the pool back there? Did you put us there?" All of my questions were meant to get to know him better and hopefully make Alguacil want to shoot or maim him less. Buddy grabbed the end of the untied bit of rope and used it to lead the Pegasus forward towards the door we had come in through. "I needed the caps. Boss said to get those who look strong and gather him up for what he needed. I don't remember putting you in there, though we do sometimes get a filly or scrawny-looking pone as a joke," he said with what sounded like a hint of remorse. We made our way back into the hallway, and my questions at Spring Bronco were mostly just rebuffed with the same old answers. "I'm a bad pony, Sunrise. I needed the caps. I only did it because I needed them that badly." I wasn't sure if the sadness in his voice was remorse, or if he was simply upset that he'd been caught. We moved down the hallway to the door at the end, passing another junction and ignoring it as the Pegasus opened the door into a large room. We looked at an elevator door to our right and to our left. Daylight coming from a set of double doors at the top of 2 flights of stairs. "Yeah, Sunrise, was it? I'm not a good pony. I don't think I'll ever be," he said as he let out a sigh, approaching the elevator door. Once we moved into the open atrium-like room, Buddy tightened his grip on the rope around Spring Bronco's sides. Alguacil, meanwhile, had moved to his side and placed his shotgun barrel to the back of Spring Bronco's head. I really hoped the Griffin wouldn't need to pull that trigger. I don't think I was prepared for that. "Surely you can come back from it. I don't care what you've done, you can always be better," I replied with a smile, placing a hoof against his cutie mark. "You have a mark that makes it seem like you have a right to be happy." He looked down in my eyes and shook his head. There was my reflection deep in his pupils, a single tear rolling down his cheek before he closed his eyes. I could feel pangs of regret and my hoof started itching again. He seemed to be resigning himself to some unseen fate. Had he let us outright? Had he started down a path to redemption? He could be a good pony if he really wanted to, couldn't he? My soul ached for something good to come out of all of this, something that would let me know the world I escaped to wasn't completely devoid of goodness. Coming upon a closed gate, Bronco moved towards the wall next to it and rose onto his hind legs, placing his hoof against a switch. "No, Sunrise. I'm a bad pony. I can't come back from that," he apologized before flipping the switch. The gate opened slowly, and I could hear the winding up of something robotic as we looked into the pip-buck-lit room. To my surprise, Spring Bronco switched from gray to red on my EFS, and another red dot appeared in the direction of the door. Gears ground as the gate rose, whining in protest to pull out of the way. First, I could see heavy metallic treads as the storage room opened. The door moved upwards slowly, and steam hissed from the other side. Each moment that passed revealed more of the towering, dragon-shaped steel chassis. Spring Bronco had just opened the gates of Hades, and here was the demon to drag us in. And now another public service announcement. The locals call it Steve, but really he is just a giant rad scorpion the size of a building. Our radio station here in New Pegasus is actually smaller than that creature. I'd advise if the ground gets to rumbling, you hide and hope Steve hasn't smelled you yet. The regulators and Talons have issued a 2,500 cap bounty for the destruction of Steve and proof to be brought to the regulator office. The last time Steve was seen, he took out 7 Talons of an 8-Griffin squad. Just keep that in mind if you plan on going after that bounty. Its right arm was equipped with a missile pod loaded with 4 warheads poking out. Its left arm was a minigun slowly winding up. At the top of its frame was a pair of red lights and a speaker behind what looked like a metal roll cage. All of its upper torso was shaped like a dragon and covered in spikes that were caked in long-since-dried blood. "Intruder detected. Powering up weapons," a chipper robotic voice declared before several things happened very quickly. Bronco's eyes widened as Alguacil pulled the trigger and the shotgun rang out. The Pegasus's gaze was resting on me as the buckshot entered his skull. With the other Talon, Alguacil leapt forward and slammed the switch in the opposite direction. The gate fell back down and sealed the sentry bot on the other side of the door. I recognized the robot model from before we went into the stable. It was a new type of heavy security bot and military assault robot, one that had been advertised by the Ministry of Wartime Technology. This was a Sentry Dragon Mark II.
Were it not for the smashed eyeball of a Pegasus sliding down the visor to my helmet, I would have been in awe at having such a marvel of technology in person. Spring Bronco's gaze had never left my own when his head exploded in his final moments. Bits of blood had hit my mouth and tongue, and I could smell the gore. My throat gagged, tasting pony remains. What? Why, he did... I couldn't believe it. With a gun to his head, his wings tied, the remorse in his voice, Spring Bronco had just betrayed us, knowing full well he would die. What kind of ponies were these? Is this what raiders are? Is this what they're like? What had just happened? The gate in front of us started to dent, and a burst of fire lit up from under the door. My brain registered it as a missile from the sentry bot, and several rounds pinged off the steel gate. I was standing right in front of the gate, staring at the headless corpse of what was once a whole Pegasus just a few seconds ago. "Sunrise, move!" Neota shouted at me. I didn't flinch. I couldn't process what had just happened. The eyeball continued to slide down my visor, hanging onto the edge by a few pieces of nerve endings. This is too much. What was I supposed to do against insanity like that? We warned him if he did anything, and Alguacil had just executed Bronco to prove that we meant it. Buddy's two arms wrapped around my unresponsive body, picking me up and rolling with me in tow as he took cover next to the doorway. Buddy set me down, and out came his claws. I stood next to him, motionless and flabbergasted, as he pressed his back to the doorframe. "What do we do?" Chifundo shouted, notably the only time he didn't rhyme. As my tail pushed something red, hard, and plastic up to my eyes, I looked down, and there was a bundle of dynamite. A glance at my pip-buck revealed that I indeed had a bundle of dynamite this entire time, and that it wasn't an illusion. I should check my own inventory more often. Also, my tail can pick up TNT, and knew that I had it? Listen here, Miss Tail, we're gonna have to talk about this later, but not right now, because... The door wasn't holding up very well. Several holes had been blown into it, and a tear was running down its center. It couldn't take another impact like that. Running off the newfound surge of adrenaline, I checked my pip-buck inventory again and found a lighter. While my hoof went to get it, I took the bundle of 5 extreme boomsticks from my tail into my mouth. "Thank you," I said before realizing I was thanking my own tail. Quickly dismissing that, I lit the fuse as a 4th and final boom echoed through the room. The gate flew off the mountings as the metal was torn free and landed with a crash near the base of the stairs almost 40 feet away. Without even thinking, I threw the bundle of soon-to-be explosion into the room the sentry bot was in. My legs moved on instinct now, but I turned, bolting for the stairway towards the sunlight-outlined door like instinct had taken over. "Run!" I declared at the top of my lungs, the rush of air from the gallop making the eyeball finally fall from my visor. I felt something inside of me die at that moment, but didn't have any real time to figure out what it was exactly. All I knew is Bronco's eyeball dropping to the floor was far heavier on my soul than any tear I had shed in all my life. I turned to look back, seeing Neota, Buddy, and Corners hard on my tail, Corners having left her box behind as a decoy. Within seconds, the dynamite exploded and the world shook with the force of a magically enhanced alicorn belly flop. Recovering from my hurried run brought on by the explosion, I looked back, and the sentry bot was engulfed in a massive gout of flame. Its missile launcher was ripped open and torn to pieces, rendered useless. The right side of its treads were completely blown apart, with road wheels scattered and hunks of armor plating from the body falling off. The room it was in was tiny, and the walls, reinforced metal and concrete, had led to the concussive waves hitting the robot inside over and over again. Despite all that, though, the sentry bot was still moving. The ensuing waves of fire inevitably died down, with small flickers of remnant flame illuminating the machine of destruction. It rolled out, much slower than it should. The death machine was dragging its right side. Its wheels were rolling off the tread, away from the death-spitting engine. The heavy Leviathan shell it was encased in was cracked in several places. However, the minigun still seemed functional as it revved up to full speed, prompting Alguacil to try to beat it to the punch by firing off 3 shots at it. We were all still in full flight as revolver shots rang out in rapid succession. The first 2 hit the sentry, yet the armor plating didn't appear to care. After the 3rd shot, we all heard a yelp from the gravelly-voiced Griffin. The gun chamber exploded in his talon, as the revolver cylinder was either not in place properly or just too badly damaged to function. The griffin squawked out in pain above the explosion as his blood flicked on my helmet visor at this range. The minigun roared. Corner's abandoned box suddenly being riddled with holes. If she had been in there, she would most likely have been dead. Buddy pulled out an energy weapon I didn't recognize and opened up on it as Corners fired her shotguns mounted to her flanks with a bite on the bit in front of her mouth. All of their shots connected, though they didn't seem to do any real damage. Corners turned to me and pulled out a pair of grenade launchers, tossed them to me and shouted, "Use this!" over the roar of gunfire. Things were moving fast now as the sentry bot turned its minigun from the ripped-up cardboard box to the next nearest target. Buddy. My mind flashed with an image of the sand dog. That creature had been so nice to me. We had only known each other for a short while, yet he had looked out for me and tried to be as soft about the reality of all of this as he could. Now I was getting a vision of bullets rending him to bits and pulverizing his body into meat salad. The barrels began to spin and there was a loud click. It was like a divine intervention. The minigun had mercifully stopped with a mechanical grinding, a noise indicating that the weapon's gears had failed. The sound of machinery ripping filled the air as the gun feed jammed and tore the mechanism apart. Dozens of shells fell into the ground, unfired from the magazine feed. Either the explosion had done much more damage than we could see, or the goddesses were looking out for us right now. I let out a sigh of relief as everyone bolted past me. Behind us were a set of stairs leading out of this large, vacant atrium room. Alguacil fired off 3 more shots, then popped his cylinder to load in another 6 rounds. I picked up one of the tube rifles in my mouth, and my tail scooped the second one. I ran past Alguacil and lay on my belly, raising the tube rifle with my hooves as I checked to see what ammo was loaded. More shots rang out as I read 25mm HE on the casing inside. Grenades? This is a grenade launcher! I slammed the breech closed and looked through the sights. Buddy was still downrange near the sentry bot, closing to attack it with his claws. "Buddy! Get clear!" I yelled, my mind operating on survival, rage, and the need to protect these ponies I had been with since I woke up. They were my only hope of surviving, and that robot had just tried to kill them. Bronco's attack, betrayal, and death, the mole rats, the dead ponies in the lake, all of it flashed before my eyes in that moment as Buddy stopped just in front of me. I went to aim, only to stop myself from biting down on the firing bit. "Buddy, get behind me. If I mess up, I don't want this going up your..." I didn't finish the sentence. It didn't feel appropriate to do so. What? I'd never called someone's ass, well, their ass. My mother would have had a fit hearing me use that kind of language. "Oh, right, Deathbot coming. Pay attention." Buddy looked back in time and jumped out of the way as I took aim and activated SATs, this time making sure my aim was spot on. Surprisingly, all it took was the lightest touch to pull the trigger, time speeding up again while SATs worked its magic. The weapon produced a loud thump. Something flew out of the tube before a fiery explosion slammed squarely on the death machine's chest. My attempt was highly effective. The cage around its red, murdery eyes fell apart as the detonation ripped at it. I noticed in numb shock that the HE grenade also incinerated part of Bronco's body. I looked to Alguacil as I reached for my tail to get the other rifle. 3 more shots followed. The first bounced off, the second went right into one of the red lights, and the third flew into an area where its internals were exposed, deeper inside the machine. There was a pause as the massive death trap stopped and began to make more grinding noises, followed by what I knew was its engine or spell matrix breaking apart. There was a sudden loud warning sound from the crippled agent of destruction, the air around the sentry bot heating up radically to the point where we could see the waves of thermal energy rolling off it. "Self-destruct activated," it shrieked as I aimed the next grenade. At that moment, while I was staring down the sight, there was a flash as the spell matrix of the sentry bot overloaded and detonated like a small mega spell. The wild magic lanced towards the 6 of us with a rainbow-colored fury that surely would have killed me. The world moved in slow motion, and as all of this happened, I could only stare in awe. I saw my death coming right at me, and I couldn't move. Fate seemed to have other plans, though, as a wall of dark black fur and flesh moved in front of me and blocked out the explosion from my sight. I felt 2 familiar arms lift me up and pull me into the chest of this warm, large creature. "Buddy?" The outward wave of force soon washed over us, and he was absorbing it all, his body taking the full impact of the explosion as he shielded me. The world sped back up, and Corners wailed in agony at the top of her lungs while the wave of flames passed over us. Just as soon as it had arrived, the explosion dissipated, and I stared up at the sand dog, my eyes full of tears. I felt like I had a friend now, for certain. This sand dog, Buddy, had just saved my life. There was a long pause as he held me tight until I realized it was hard to breathe from his hug. I managed to free a hoof from his grasp and used it to tap desperately at his side. "Buddy, air," I sputtered through my compressed lungs. Thankfully, he got the message and dropped me to my hooves. Buddy shook off his duster and stood upright like a tough dog. I looked at him through the tears that I had forced back, suppressed for later. He was covered in burns and cuts where his skin had been torn open by the blast, and he was bleeding in several places that hadn't cauterized from the heat. Overwhelmed by concern, my body scrambled to take out bandages. I immediately put them on him and shuddered, thinking of the pain he might be in. "Buddy, thank you. Please, please, please stop bleeding," I chattered through my teeth, looking at the horrific wounds the self-destruct had inflicted. "I need a sewing kit. And does any pony have any heavy bandages?" I heard Neota's voice and turned around, looking at the stairs to see him standing over Corners. I couldn't make out why, but Corners was on the ground, screaming in agony. The faint ringing lingering in my ears was deadening the screams to me. I looked at my pip-buck. There was a sewing kit and magical bandages in my pack. I still don't know where all this stuff came from. What had I done to get all these things? "Neota, backpack, inner pocket next to the kitchen kit. There are magical bandages and a sewing kit there," I declared as I forced all the emotions away from my mind and worked to stop Buddy's bleeding. I kept working frantically on Buddy, and he didn't seem to mind. He just smiled down at me. I lifted my bloody and ash-caked visor so I could see better and kept working with beads of sweat on my brow. My helmet fell off when I bumped his claw, though I couldn't care less in my frenzy. He reached down and placed a paw into my mane and started to softly pet me. He was smearing a bit of his blood on me, but I didn't care. "It's okay, little one. I'll be fine. You go help Neota," he reassured me. I looked up and stared into his eyes. He looked as though he saw something beautiful that he wanted to shield from the world. His dark green eyes were staring into my bright violet ones, and I saw my reflection in his. It was the same look Spring Bronco had, but something about it was slightly more pure. I envisioned something in his soul there. I felt it grow. I nodded to him as I finished the current bandage and handed him another rolled up one in case he needed it. I ran up to Neota and reached out to help as he was stitching along Corner's broken leg. The stitches went all the way around from one end to the other, a warning that the leg had been nearly severed. I got the magical bandages and prepared to apply them as he finished his work. My mind was in pure work mode, and I didn't have time to comprehend the damage done to Corners. All my emotions were pushed out. I felt helpless as my tail took a healing potion from Neota's free hoof to give him more room to work. After swiftly uncorking it, I shoved the potion into Corners' mouth with my tail and tilted her head back with my hoof to get her to drink it all. This area wasn't as well lit, so I let Neota direct my pip-buck around to keep the light where he needed it. "Let this be right. I don't want her to lose that leg." Neota finished in no time, and I could already see the flesh was starting to heal. Regrettably, there was definitely going to be a scar, and a horrific one at that, where the sinew and flesh had been nearly completely annihilated. I handed the bandage back to Neota to finish up with the wound, and looked at Corners as her box landed near to us. The explosion had likely sent it airborne, and somehow it hadn't been turned to dust. There were some holes in it, and it was singed, but other than that, it was surprisingly intact. I took it and placed it on her head, and Corners curled up against the box. All but the leg Neota had stitched up was now concealed from this underground hellhole. "It'll be okay, Corners," Neota said with a soft, reassuring smile. I realized this was the first time I'd seen him show any emotion. He nuzzled the cardboard box she was in and looked me over. "Go on, Sunrise. You check outside for us with Alguacil. Make sure it's clear." At least he has some decent bedside manner. I was hesitant to step away, but something told me to act. Besides, if I stayed much longer and had a chance to think about the horrific wounds, I think I'll find that my stomach might not be completely empty. I slowly walked up the stairs and stood beside Alguacil. The griffin claw was wrapped up in several bandages, so he must have treated his wound while I was tending to Corners. After he shot me a knowing nod and I gave him one in return, he flipped a switch in the wall, causing doors to open and reveal a dull and cloudy day. Well, folks, there you have it, another exciting installment of the Dead Tree Saga. I can't speak for Sunrise, but it seems mighty odd to have a tale with a mind of its own. That would certainly make me twitch a twitch. I hope that these folks are still alive and kicking out there and listening to me, but I guess we'll just have to wait and see what happens to them by tuning in next time for Chapter 3. So until then, make sure to keep your weapons loaded and your spirits high. This is Mr. New Pegasus, signing off.